finally it's time for some pinball and LGR. Actual physical pinball, not computer game recreations for once. And yeah, I'm completely new to this. I've never had a table at home before now, so this video is really going to focus on my experience so far. Receiving and unboxing it, the assembly and setup, and testing it out, of course. Yeah, it's a bit more involved than playing Epic Pinball, to say the least. PC games like that will always be my first love though, along with Space Cadet and 3D Ultra Pinball and many others in the 90s. But compared to the real thing, virtualized pinball is practically a different game entirely. There is no comparison to the actual physics and sensations you get in person, and any time back in the day, if I found myself in an arcade or bowling alley with a few pins on offer, then at least a couple of quarters would be going into the table that most appealed to me. And Star Wars Fall of the Empire here would have absolutely been one I would have been psyched to play as a kid. Though it would have been impossible, this table isn't even a year old, having been released in September 2025 by Stern Pinball. And like I said, this is my first time having a pinball table at home, thanks to them sending over this review unit. Yeah, after my house was rebuilt after the hurricane and I moved back in, one of my first tasks was to start putting a movie and game room back together. And having a pinball table in here has always been a pipe dream, but to be honest, the things have continually intimidated the heck out of me. They're big, complicated, dazzling, expensive things with 1,000 moving parts. But a few months ago, I just said screw it and cold emailed Stern Pinball Incorporated. SPI was genuinely the first company that came to mind for me, being the largest and longest running pinball manufacturer in the modern day, with a rich history going back decades. Back to Gary Stern helping to found Data East's pinball division in 1986, them being acquired by Sega in 94, becoming Sega Pinball, and finally Gary purchasing them and renaming to Stern Pinball. And Stern has built pins ever since, over 80 different tables, and I always enjoy trying out the new ones at pinball arcades and conventions I attend. So yeah, when they replied to my email saying they'd be happy to send one over for review, I was stoked. And to be clear, they're not paying me for this video, and I'm not keeping the table either. I'll be sending it back after this. But I was excited to check it out regardless, because hey, what better way to dip my toes into pinball at home than borrowing a brand new one, while also being able to document and share how it went for those who've been curious, like me, about bringing a pinball table home. Because yeah, buying one is a serious investment, not only in terms of cash, but in space and time and general anxiety about maintenance. That last one concerned me the most, but I gotta say, having this Fall of the Empire for a while has really eased my worries. It's a beautifully complex but cunningly simple machine once you start looking into how it's designed. And speaking of which, Fall of the Empire was designed by none other than John Borg, one of the go-to guys in modern pinball design, and he's worked on putting together all kinds of tables across the past 3.5 decades, including the 1992 Star Wars pinball table, and one of the earliest ones that I remember playing as a kid at the local skating rink, and I found it amusing that here we are 30-some years later, my first table at home is another one he worked on. And by the way, this particular review unit they sent is the premium edition, so it's the middle option, along with the pro version having fewer features, and the limited edition having a number of added lights and things, and of course not as many of them being built. Each have their own different selections of hand-drawn artwork all over the table. It's some really classic-looking Star Wars stuff by Vincent Prasa and Jeremy Packer, aka Zombie Yeti. It really fits the original trilogy perfectly in my view. The whole thing is like looking at an extension of the original theatrical movie posters and VHS covers, blending those movies together in a kind of mishmash compilation of Star Warsy goodness. But before I could enjoy any of that, I had to get the thing here first, and of course that means shipping by freight due to size and weight. Though not as much weight as I assumed actually, only about 270 pounds, which is less than certain arcade cabinets I've hauled around. It collapses to a form that's pretty compact too, all things considered, since the legs ship detached and the back box folds downward. Yeah, again, I had no idea how these things shipped or anything. I'm a total noob to all aspects of this, including the unboxing, which I assumed it would ship in 2 pieces and 2 boxes, but nope. And once I found the paperwork up top, it's recommended to slice open the whole box from the front and dolly the entire wrapped up table where you want it. Something I got some help doing, just getting it onto a hand truck and through the doors into my basement. Well, up to a point anyway. Unfortunately, the doors I have are narrow enough and are mounted to where they can't fully swing out of the way, which meant the full pinball table was just ever so slightly too wide for the opening, so I went ahead and pulled the door off its hinges to get the table the rest of the way in. If I'd had the LGR warehouse ready back then, I would have just wheeled it in there, no problem. I now see one reason folks often put their pinball tables in the garage. Then once I got it where I wanted, I had to get the legs attached and set the thing up, which, I don't recommend doing alone, but my friend helping me earlier had already left and I was too excited to wait, so do as I say, not as I do, I guess. This entire setup process is really a two-person job, since once you get the two front legs bolted on, the entire back half needs to be lifted up to attach the other two, which I managed, but again, don't follow my lead here and get some help with this part. It was doable, but a little tricky. That said, once all four legs were attached, all that was left to do was push up the back box and bolt that into place. Then open the front door and grab the rest of the accessories from the cash box, and for the most part, it's looking like a pinball table, though it's not quite ready. The next thing is to get the actual pinball balls going. This front edge panel pops off by disconnecting two clips inside of the coin door, and that removes entirely to reveal the edge of the glass. It's not sharp or anything, but I went ahead and used gloves anyway, cause why not? And yeah, they recommend wiping down the balls, since they're a bit oily from the factory. So I did, while plopping them onto the playfield and got them situated in their little ball bay underneath. Then there's balancing the playfield along both the X and Y axes. X shouldn't be a problem so long as the playfield is installed correctly and the machine isn't on some weird horizontal incline. And the Y-axis, that's down to the legs of the machine, and it has a built-in bubble level on top for this. Now, there's nothing saying that it has to be exactly in the middle, but it will affect ball speed and overall difficulty, so the middle makes sense and is default. And the legs can be adjusted by unscrewing the feet at the bottom, and in my case it was a little off because of the rug it was partially standing on. Then the last real thing is the tilt sensor, which is where this plumb bob comes in. There's this metal rod and ring attached to a wire that the plumb bob screws into, and whenever the machine is moved too far and the metal touches, the game is tilted. And you can adjust how far it hangs down to make tilting easier or harder too, which was neat to find out. The final things the instructions recommend doing is taking a quick look inside to ensure everything is connected and nothing got knocked loose during shipment, which I did, and sure, looks good to me. Not that I really know what I'm looking at other than a whole bunch of boards and wires connected to a bunch of other boards and wires. Neat. So I got the thing plugged in and powered on, and oh yeah, time for some Star Wars. What does that mean? Okay, maybe not time for Star Wars just yet, because we've got our first error message. A couple of node boards aren't being found, whatever those are, and not only does the playfield not fully light up, but none of the controls are responding. It was time to contact tech support. And I'm happy to say that within minutes of me submitting a support ticket on their website, they got back in touch and told me precisely what board and connection to look at inside. And sure enough, it was one of the PCBs all the way towards the back that I hadn't noticed before, and one of the RJ45 cables had come loose during transit. I pushed it back in, powered it back on, and heck yeah, man. I gotta put it back together now. Yeah, it was a super simple fix. Those node boards function separately, but many are wired up in sequence, so figuring out where a cable came loose is pretty logical. But now it's up and running perfectly, so after playing a test round or two, I dove right into the setup menus, reached using these buttons inside the coin door. And this is where you access all the usual arcade operator goodies, things like audio-visual tweaks, difficulty and sensitivity adjustments, free play mode, hardware diagnostics, and so on and on. There's a lot more here than your standard video arcade machine, that's for sure. And yep, this also includes Ethernet and Wi-Fi for doing things like downloading over-the-air firmware updates and connecting to Stern's online services. Yeah, internet-connected pinball tables still feel strange to me considering the physics-based electromechanical nature of it all. But yeah, if you choose to connect this to a Stern Insider account, you can access high-score leaderboards, achievements, badges, experience points, and all kinds of modern silliness. something you can track across different tables by using your smartphone on this QR code reader, logging you in wherever you happen to find a connected Stern machine. Off or online, though, you get to choose from several game types, including competition mode, an asteroid field minigame, and multiple styles of classic hot seat multiplayer with up to 4 players, both cooperative and competitive. Along with a DJ mode. Yeah, this just turns the whole machine into a music player for the built-in soundtrack. I have to imagine it's the most rarely used feature on here. On a related topic, there's also a built-in streamer mode, which I never considered to be an option for pinball, but it makes sense for all the licensed music. Dollar store John Williams is quite the downgrade, but whelp, sacrifices must be made in avoiding copyright strikes. On that note, Stern boasts over 1,000 film and audio assets that have been included here, both playing through the speakers and on that nice-looking screen. It's an 18.5-inch 1080p display, apparently an upgrade over previous tables and part of their Spike 3 platform. And while I personally kind of prefer and really enjoy the charm of a classic dot matrix display on pinball games, for this kind of modern thing, it makes total sense and it looks great to the point of being kind of distracting. A lot of times I end up wanting to see what's playing on the screen and I should be paying attention to the table. But of course, there's always Chris Bartlett performing as C-3PO, doing all the audio callouts and letting you know what's happening and what's important to pay attention to during gameplay.
You've activated the multipliers. You've placed a short multiplier. General save enabled.
Right, so as for the gameplay itself, I hope you'll forgive my not knowing all the terminology or the most notable aspects to more seasoned pinheads. The way I approach pinball really comes down to whether or not the first couple or few games compel me to continue playing beyond that. If it doesn't grab me after a half a dozen balls have been played, then I just move on to the next table. But that's in an arcade setting. Having one at home, just one, it's an entirely different feeling. Since this thing is always there, I can more freely just sit back, enjoy the mechanics, experiment with different strategies, and more casually learn the rules, both by playing and by referencing the rule sheet, which has 22 pages detailing skill shots, bonuses, multi-ball, point combos, and jackpots. And to that point, yeah, I truly enjoy the heck out of this table and what it offers. It's a tasty mixture of momentum and pushback, with speedier wide-open areas flanked by more constricted shots that encourage just enough flipper manipulation for my taste that doesn't leave me feeling too punished, at least as a relatively casual player. Yeah, for me, on this table, there's mainly one straight down the middle trap that consistently wrecks me, and that's whenever I fail to fully make it up the hyperspace jump ramp. If that's raised and the ball doesn't fly on through, chances are high it'll toss it right down the drain. However, one of the coolest parts of Fall of the Empire is the Jedi Ball Save feature, prominently labeled beneath the flippers where you see Yoda holding a pinball in midair with the Force. And that's the idea here. You use the Force, so to speak, by pressing the action button to enable an electromagnet that can grab onto the ball and eject it outwards back onto the playfield, once you have enough charge built up via the spinners. It's tricky to do correctly, and I haven't pulled it off too often, but when it works, it feels awesome. Just seeing the ball fly upward through the flippers or popping out from an outlane, yeah, I love a good magnet gimmick, and Fall of the Empire has a really good one, at least on the premium and limited edition models. It's all enjoyable though. I mean, just seeing which targets and ramps engage which classic movie scene from the trilogy and which corresponding game mode that matches up with. Like the Vader modes activated under his decapitated helmet, which turns the lights an intimidating red and provides opportunities to engage 8 different sub-modes with their own objectives. There's also the Death Star, which is a fun way to engage one of the many multi-ball modes. First by hitting the door and lowering it, then flying into the entrance a few more times to get multi-ball going. Other notable fixtures are a vertical up kicker near the AT-AT, a cute little motorized model that collapses down on its front legs from the Battle of Hoth. And underneath the Millennium Falcon is the aforementioned hyperspace jump ramp with different positions and modes enabled depending on context. And then the glowing Jabba over there, he's one of the trickier areas for me to consistently get into, But when you do, you can enable several events that work similar to the Vader ones. Jabba's Palace, the Rancor, Sarlacc Pit Escape, and so on. They're some of my favorites to play, whenever I can actually get them going. And finally, occurring on top of everything else are the Rebel missions, 24 of them in total, with 3 for each movie protagonist. Though, to be honest, I'm not consistent enough to pick and choose with those. I mostly end up aiming for my favorite specialized modes and try to keep those going as long as I can, which usually isn't long. Oh, come on!
That's 2 Yogi, Junior.
Use the action button to control your Jedi.
But yeah, that's about it for Stern's Fall of the Empire. Unfortunately, because I'm going to have to send it back, and dang it, I do not want to. Which I guess is a good sign. I'm going to miss this thing. Star Wars Fote is certainly one I'd be happy to buy as my first at-home table, at least if I was going to buy a brand new modern machine. And I don't know, I'm considering it. Because yeah, as much as I enjoy vintage tables and would love to own an early 90s classic, the appeal of getting a brand new one is huge. Fresh components, active customer support, warranties, online thingies, plus all of the add-ons and upgrade options, both from hobbyists and officially sanctioned Stern storefront stuff. I'd absolutely be getting into customization and modding if I owned a table myself, but we'll see what the future holds. For now, though, I'm glad to have experienced this one for a bit, and thanks again to Stern folks for loaning it to me for this video. If you want to know more about Fall of the Empire, including pricing and availability, check out the link in the description, and hey, why not hit up your local pinball arcade if you have one? It's the kind of business I love to support, and I don't visit mine often enough, but that'll be changing after I send this back to the company. I gotta come over and take off my doors first, though. Hey, if you enjoyed this LGR pinball thing and you'd care to see some more, well, I've covered computer game pinball and that's about it. I hope to get to some more real pinball eventually, but in the meantime, there's always a bunch of retro computing things in the works for LGR here, so I hope you stick around. And of course, thank you for watching.